The Reds and the Orioles both had big plans. Those plans this year, not really working out too well.
You are Locked On MLB Crossover, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hey there, Orioles and Reds fans. Today is Friday, July 3rd, 2026, and welcome into a crossover episode between Locked On Orioles and Locked On Reds. I am Connor Newcomb, the host of Locked On Orioles. That is Jeff Carr, the host of Locked On Reds. And today's crossover episode is brought to you by FanDuel. The biggest stage in world soccer is here. Let there be goals on FanDuel. Visit FanDuel.com to get started now. And Jeff, we've got these two teams facing off in Cincinnati for a 3-game series this weekend. And thought this was a good time to do a crossover episode because these two teams enter this series kind of having the same vibe, I feel like, right now, which is major disappointment among their two fan bases.
Yep. Yeah, 100%. I mean, you're looking at it from one angle and you're thinking, well, they're not that far out. They could do it. And then you look at where they are as opposed to where the expectations were at the beginning of the season. You're like, okay, yeah, this is not cool. Like, they're not hitting on what anybody expected them to do.
And, you know, you look at the two teams and it's kind of a different spot to get here. You have Cincinnati, who was, I don't know if surprise playoff team. That's maybe, I'm not giving them enough credit last year. Like, they were a team that I think from the beginning of the season, if you told them, hey, the Reds got a wild card spot in 6 months, I don't think anybody would have been super surprised by that. They have a lot of talent on that team. And that was kind of, but that was not the culmination, I think, of this Reds team building up. Going to the wild card and getting knocked out by the Dodgers in the first round was not the culmination of what they were building. For the Orioles, they kind of already reached their culmination with 101 wins and a division title a couple years ago. They were going the other direction. They had a horrendous season last year. Everything that could have gone poorly did. But everybody, I think, thought, hey, this team is going to at least bounce back. How much will they bounce back? Who knows? But they will be better. And while they have technically been better this year than they were last year, not by enough. You look at where these two teams are right now. I mean, neither is really in their division race right now at all. The Reds are in last and the Orioles are in fourth. They're both in the wild card race, but it's like teetering. The Orioles are 5 games back of a wild card. The Reds are 6. So I wanted to start with the Reds side of this, Jeff, in that, what do you feel like has been the number one glaring issue that has led this team, who made the postseason last year, to be 40-46 and this far out at the moment?
It's the fact that every X factor that we had earmarked in spring training has gone the opposite way. Like, you know, every team's got those guys that you're like, boy, if this goes right for him, it's going to be a good year. And there were a couple of guys like that with the Reds, and all of them have gone negatively. I mean, Matt McLain, Noelvi Marte, some of the pitching staff. We've not seen Rhett Lauder really do well. We've not seen the bullpen do well. There's been a lot of variance there that has just doomed this team at multiple different times, because what happens is one of those X factors has a good game and then the rest of them don't. And then they just kind of trade off as to how that is working. And that's really what's been the problem here, is that there's been no wins. Like, you know, the coin flips, nothing's landing on heads over here. It's all tails right now. And it's gotten really annoying, and it's had us point the finger at the front office. Like, there's definitely some guys that they invested in, some guys that they have counted on that have not performed well, but also the other guys that they brought in, like Eugenio Suarez even, are not playing well either. And so there's just a whole lot of what is going on with these 50-50 balls right now, and why are they all going against the Reds?
Is it, when you look at the team, you know, you talked about it a little bit, but like, is the bullpen horrendous? Is the rotation horrendous? Is the offense or defense horrendous? Or is it just more of like little things going wrong in every phase for this team?
It's little things for sure. I wouldn't say that the talent is bad. That's the most frustrating part about this, especially, you know, you kind of talk about that the Orioles had a great season a couple of years ago. The Reds had a good month in April. They were 20-11 and they were in first place in the NL Central. And we're like, okay, this season is going to be what we thought it was. And ever since that point, I I can't remember exactly if this is the case, but I think they've been the worst team in baseball. Like statistically, wins and losses, all the things. Like they've just completely flatlined. And injuries have played a factor. I mean, they lost all of their high leverage arms except for Tony Santillan at one point. And then just as they were starting to get their high leverage arms back, Tony Santillan went on the IL. And then he's also facing a bit of residual effects from last year where he pitched in 80 ball games. Like relief pitchers just don't do that much. And then you see what happens in the following season. So you don't have that continuity in the bullpen. They've really had to turn to some guys that you're like, yeah, didn't have him on the depth chart at all. And then in the lineup, you've seen just fall offs. And honestly, it's unfortunate to say because it's not really been a quick fall off. It's been a long fall off for Matt McLain, but he just has not bounced back. He has these good games every like 2 weeks that make you think, oh, hey, there it is. You know, that whole from Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. You're like, yep, that's the one. No, he just can't build on those things. And so when it comes to ultimately what this team needs to do, there's just a lot of guys that just need to get better at performing.
What is the hope for a turnaround if there is some? Because while 40-46 doesn't feel good, and especially as you talked about since April, it doesn't feel good. When it's July 3rd, and even if there's a lot of teams ahead of you, if you're only 6 games out of a playoff spot, you are not done and dusted. You are not toast. If you put on a really good second half, what is the hope? Is it that, JJ Bleday and Nathaniel Lowe are kind of helping this offense survive? Because it feels like besides those two guys and Ellie and Sal Stewart, that's kind of the Reds hitters right now for this season. Or is it guys coming back? Is it something that there's a turnaround that you can look at maybe in the rotation or something?
It's definitely a bit of health with Hunter Greene coming back on Saturday, which I know we'll talk about a lot here in a little bit. That's key. And getting Emilio Pagan back in the bullpen and things like that are nice. But yeah, I think that the continued hope is just in the growth of Sal Stewart, because this dude is having some crazy at bats that he does not look like a rookie. And he is. Like, this is his first full season in the major leagues. And when Orioles fans watch this series with the Reds, they're going to watch this dude and be like, how long has he been here? And be like, yeah, he played last September. And then now, like, that's it. And he's really, really good at the bat. Even if he, strikes out or something like that, you watch that at bat and you're like, okay, I mean, that wasn't a bad miss. He's not swinging at pitches in the other, batter's box. He's not looking at pitches right down the middle with a lot of frequency. I mean, even yesterday, he hit a home run off of Jacob Mizorowski that was 102.5 miles an hour fastball from Mizorowski because, he likes to do that. But he, sort of almost did like this 3/4 swing just to make sure he gets the barrel on the ball. And then it finds its way over the wall because as long as you hit something like that, it goes. He's not trying to swing out of his shoes at every single pitch. And it's so refreshing to watch. So he's going to be the biggest X factor for them moving forward. And then if they could get anybody back to form or anyone to break out amongst the group of I'm not even looking for all of them. I'm just looking for one of them. I just want one of them to work. And I don't know who that's going to be, though. I cannot pinpoint if it's going to be Marte, if it's going to be Matt McLain, if TJ Friedl is going to bounce back. He's been another huge reason why this lineup has struggled so much, because he was the leadoff hitter for the last couple of years, and the Reds just kind of penciled him in as the leadoff hitter in perpetuity. But the last couple of months of last season, like the second half of last season, he was bad. The first half of this season, he's been horrendous. Like, if you go back a calendar year, I was looking at this before we jumped on. He has 505 at bats since last July 3rd, and he has a 78 WRC plus. They penciled him in like he was way better than that. And because of that, they are seeing what the problem is. And now Ellie De La Cruz is going to hit leadoff, which I've always wanted, but it kind of feels like that's out of necessity rather than it's the Reds picking their best strategy.
Yeah. Regression comes for a lot of players, unfortunately, and regression might be a theme as we kind of change this topic to the Orioles side of the struggles right after this.
A big thank you to our friends over at Amazon for this limited break. This back-to-school season, spend less on your kids with Amazon. Look, we all know how crazy back-to-school shopping can really get. I mean, the experience starts out with just a couple of school supplies, like maybe a pencil here or a stapler there, maybe a pair of scissors over here, and then all of a sudden you're buying, like, Trapper Keepers and stuff. Look, do people buy Trapper Keepers anymore? Anyway, the point is your list gets insane. I mean, when you buy clothes for back to school, then your kid has a growth spurt 2 weeks later, and you're right back where you started. Sometimes it genuinely feels like they're growing faster than your budget can keep up. Or when you're buying supplies and you find yourself asking how a calculator became one of the more expensive items in the cart. The graphing and the scientific and all the different calculators. I mean, I wasn't expecting math to start costing me money before school even began. It feels like there's a life lesson in there somewhere. I'm still trying to figure it out, though. So remember, with Amazon's low back-to-school prices, just spend less on your kids, because every dollar you don't spend on them is a dollar that you haven't spent on them. Shop back to school at Amazon and spend less on your kids. Thank you so much for making us part of your day here on Locked On Reds and Locked On Orioles, this crossover, getting you set for the weekend series. Actually begins a 9-game homestand going into the All-Star break for the Cincinnati Reds, and welcoming in the Baltimore Orioles. These two teams really feel like they are in similar positions, and that's what we wanted to hit on before we dive into the pitching matchups and, you know, the guys that we are looking for in this series to go. I want to start with this, Connor, because it feels like the Reds experienced a good month at the beginning of this season, and we got really excited. The Orioles won 100 games not just a couple of years ago, and it doesn't feel like they've ever gotten back to that point. I think that there's a common theme of regression that we'll definitely get into, but I also kind of want to get your take on this. It feels like the front office for the Baltimore Orioles had a moment to invest more. They waited too long. Now they got Pete Alonso, but it kind of felt like it was half measures at that point. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, it's so interesting to look back on, because they didn't win a playoff game when they won 101 games, won the AL East, had the number 1 seed in the American League. The next year was a weird year where they won 91 and they made the playoffs again, and they also got swept out again. But that year was, people don't look back on that year as fondly as some do, because they were the best team in the American League in the first half, and they basically played 500 ball in the second half. So they were really kind of tough to watch for 2+ months and kind of limped into the playoffs that year. And it just carried over into 2025. You know, it gets Brandon Hyde fired last May. They basically are just a bad team all of last year. They sell. They finally get aggressive this offseason. They trade a bunch of prospects for Shane Baz. They give out $155 million to Pete Alonso. They go and get, you know, a legitimate closer in Ryan Helsley in free agency. And it just, they've been a little better than last year, but not better enough to consider themselves like a true contender. They're only more so in this because the American League has been so bad. Like, they've only hung around because so many other teams in the AL. And it was interesting because 2023 was the best year. That was the final year John Angelos was the owner of the team. He sold the team that winter. He was notoriously cheap. He wanted to run really low payrolls. He wanted to be the Rays, essentially. And David Rubenstein came in, took over the team for 2024 with a lot more money. He didn't get to run that offseason, but he did okay the trade for Corbin Burns, which was a huge jump for the Orioles to go and get an ace. And the thought was, okay, the offseason after 24, they've made back-to-back postseasons. They haven't won a game, but they look like one of the best teams in the AL. Now for the first offseason, they have an owner who's willing to spend. And while they spent more last offseason, they still kind of tried to thread the needle, and obviously it backfired. And I think the most disappointing part, Jeff, is they learned from that. And they said, we have the money. Let's be more aggressive next offseason. And they were way more aggressive, and it still hasn't worked, which is why I think what we're back to is Pete Alonso's been the Orioles' best hitter, right? Like, their best player for a while now has been Blaze Alexander, who they acquired this offseason. The biggest issues have been the regression of the young crop of Orioles prospects who became talented stars. That's their bigger problem. Like, they can add as many players on the outside as they want, But when Gunnar Henderson looks this bad, it almost kind of doesn't matter. And that's why it kind of lines up a little bit with the Reds. You know, Henderson was a little better prospect than Matt McLain was, but like that's a guy who you were counting on and he's not giving you anything. And it's kind of similar there.
I mean, I've got, and the camera's kind of cropped so you can't see it, but I've got the cover of MLB The Show that Gunnar Henderson was on with Ellie De La Cruz, and it was clear that he was being earmarked as one of those guys that could be one of the superstars of the game. And 99 WRC plus just ain't cutting it. Like there's some guys that you would say, okay, yeah, sure, that's fine. Not Gunnar Henderson. Like, what do you think the biggest factor in that has been? Is he like one of them guys that's stepping up there trying to hit a bases empty grand slam, or is it that he has changed his approach in total and he needs to go back to what he was doing?
Yeah, I did a breakdown episode earlier in June when he's never been, he's basically been hovering around league average all year. So it's not like he's been terrible. Like he's still playing solid defense at shortstop. He's still like a 2-win player. He's still been valuable to the Orioles, but this is a guy who was an MVP candidate. He is not looking anything close to that right now. And that hurts the team when he's the star player. It's a lot of chase. The plate approach has gotten worse this year. And I think some of it might be he just came out and struggled out of the gate. Now he's hitting more home runs again. His power got kind of zapped last year because he was playing through a shoulder injury all season. His power has come back. The home run numbers look very normal and good for Gunnar Henderson, but everything else doesn't. Strikeouts are up, chasing is up, swing and miss is up. He used to just be fine with, you know what, if you're going to throw me a fastball in the outside corner, I'm going to take it. Even if it puts me behind 0-1, even if it puts me behind 1-2, I'm confident that you can't do it again. And when you let that ball leak in just a little bit further, I'm going to do damage. And that approach is gone. He's chasing those pitches on the outside half, on the outside corner, just off the plate, and he's chasing them early in counts. And even if he's not striking out, guys are getting him to hit rollover grounders because he's not willing to be patient enough to take his walks when he needs them and then drive a ball when it comes back into the middle of the zone. His chasing, his approach got a little bit better in June, which is why there's a little bit of an up arrow on Gunnar Henderson. But the overall production still hasn't come. They just moved him back up to leadoff. He had been hitting second basically all year. Hitting leadoff is something he used to do for the Orioles. They're thinking maybe that will give him a change. He had a nice series against the White Sox from the leadoff spot this week, so maybe that'll boost him in some way. But he's just, I think you explained it well. Like he's trying to hit a grand slam when he comes up with nobody on base. I think he feels a lot of pressure for what's gone on with this team the last 2 years because he is the star. He is the most talented player on the team. And I just don't know if he's handling all that stress and that pressure very well. He's very animated when things are going well, but on the bad side, he's also very animated when things are going poorly. And you can see it kind of play out on the field in the dugout. He makes an error. He strikes out in a big spot. It's not the reaction you kind of want from a guy you know is going to come up in another big spot later in the game, and you're going to need him to come through. And a lot of this game is mental, and I think some of that is happening for Gunnar Henderson, where he's struggling a little bit with that part of the game. And he just turned 25 on Monday. He's still a young player, and maybe he hasn't fully matured into the player he will be. But I've been saying this all year on Locked On Orioles. Like the O's have the talent to make the playoffs, especially in a down year in the American League with the extra wild card spot. And they've been hanging around the wild card all year, and they can hang around without Gunnar Henderson, but they can't make the playoffs without Gunnar Henderson being Gunnar Henderson. And we are into July, and we still have not seen the true Gunnar yet. And if the O's just never see it, if he's a 105 WRC plus guy at the end of the year, they're just not going to make the postseason no matter what anyone else does because he's just so important to this team.
So he being the biggest factor, because I was looking at this on Baseball Reference, the Reds are 6 games under 500. The Orioles are 8 games under 500. Baseball Reference has the Reds at a 2% chance to make the playoffs. They have the Orioles at a 10% chance to make the play. I'm rounding up a little bit. It's our podcast. We can round up if we want to. Don't need decimal signs. But what is he the biggest factor of that actually coming all the way through and going from 10% to 100%?
Yeah, it's Gunnar's the player. If you're looking at one player again, other guys are. I mean, Adley's had a great bounce back year, which has been huge for the O's. He had 2 really down years. Pete Alonso's been everything they signed him to be. Their starting rotation had a horrendous start to the year. Trevor Rogers has figured it out again. Kyle Bradish looks good again. Shane Baz is like turning into a workhorse, which is not really what they got him to do, but they'll kind of take it at this point. Like he's throwing 6 or 7 innings every time he goes out there, which is nice. the bullpen is the bullpen. It's the easiest thing to address at the deadline. So if they do want to be buyers, they can make that better. Ryan Helsley just went back on the IL with an elbow issue, which is not good for anyone. And that's his second elbow injury of the year. So the Reds will not see him this weekend, more than likely, as the O's closer. But the other part about Gunnar is, Mike Elias on Saturday, so 6 days ago, the O's had won the opening game of the series against the Nationals that weekend on Friday night. And on Saturday afternoon, he talked to the media before the Saturday game, and they asked him about the deadline because it was about a month away, and the O's had a losing record, but they were also a game back of the wild card. So it's like, how do you assess that in a weird year? And he was like, we are buyers until I tell you otherwise. This is the most firm he has ever said at a deadline. We are buyers. And I don't know if that's changed because they've played horrible since then, and now they're 5 games back, and maybe that changes the outlook a little bit. But it depends what the O's look like in 3 weeks. If they can tread water enough to be in the mix, I think they have to buy, because you can't punt another season because you only have a year and a half left of Adley Rutschman. You only have 2.5 years left of Gunnar Henderson. A lockout is going to impact 2027 in some capacity. I don't think you can punt another season. So the 2 big factors are turnaround and A, we've seen Gunnar be an MVP level player before. If he gets anywhere close to that, they can get back to it. And the other one is, even if they're struggling, it seems like Mike Elias wants to buy. So maybe he can bring in enough talent at the deadline that makes this team look a little bit better. And I've watched a lot of these AL teams, Jeff. They are not good. It's not just the Orioles. These American League teams are not good. And so somebody might go on a run. Somebody might never go on a run. And the AL final wildcard team might legitimately be 81-81 this year. And that's what gives me just a sliver of hope, too.
I think it's going to be interesting how Mike Elias attacks this. I was a bit jealous when I saw those comments because, well, it's nice to see somebody from a front office say, like, direct things. All we hear over here is, well, we'll see what we got. We're not sure. We'll see. We'll see. You sound like parents. You sounds like when you asked your mom and dad for something, I'm like, well, we'll see. That's how the Reds front office sounds. But the deadline will certainly shape those things. And as we head into the All-Star break, this series is very important going into July 4th. And let's break down what the pitching matchups and some X factors in these 3 games look like coming up next. All throughout the series, you can follow us on social media. You got Connor over on X at, what's your username? We didn't put
Connor Newcomb with the underscore on the end. Just somebody had Connor Newcomb. Somebody still has Connor Newcomb. So the underscore is on the end.
See, and I'm the same way where I got Jeff Carr. So I had to add an F in there, which, by the way, it is my middle name, but Jeff Carr with 3 Fs on X, also on TikTok as well. We talking all about this series all throughout each and every ball game. And it's going to be interesting. I mean, the first game out of the gate, like you mentioned, you've got a bit of a resurgent Trevor Rogers pitching against Brady Singer, who honestly started off the season looking like he needed to be anywhere but the starting rotation. However, the Reds were so hurt that was not going to happen. And he has kind of righted the ship here recently. His last 5 starts look a lot better than his season numbers do. So it's going to be a battle of who is the most resurgent amongst these 2 pitchers. And the Reds lineup, when it comes to facing Trevor Rogers, was hurt a little bit with Dane Myers going on the IL. He made that crazy catch in Milwaukee on Tuesday night, but injured his shoulder in the process because he went as fast as you possibly can into an outfield wall, shoulder first. And so he's not going to be playing in this series. And the Reds are going to have to decide between playing Matt McLain in center field so that they can get the platoon advantage, or playing TJ Friedl in center field, who is obviously a better center fielder, but cannot hit lefties anymore. It's going to be an interesting lineup going up against Trevor Rogers tonight.
Yeah, we'll see. The righties haven't super phased Rogers recently. Even when he's turned things back around, teams are generally stacking their lineup with right-handers against Rogers, and he has found his four-seam fastball. That has been the big difference for Rogers. His four-seamer and changeup has really been the mix he's always used, whether he's been a Marlin or an Oriole against right-handed hitters when he's had success. And the changeup was incredible last year when Rogers had a 1.8 ERA in 18 starts. He hasn't really found that pitch this year, but his last 3 starts, his average velo has gone from like 93.5 all the way up to about 95 miles per hour on the four-seam fastball. This is velo he hasn't had since like his second year with the Marlins. We're talking like 5 years ago since Rogers was throwing this hard. and the command has been pristine. So you go from Rogers, who had 93 with shaky command early this year, to 95 with pinpoint command from a lefty. That is a very, very different kind of pitcher that you're going to face. He's throwing four-seamers up in the zone. They're getting good ride. He comes from kind of a sidearm angle, so it adds more deception to that pitch as well when he throws it up to righties. And he's been throwing like 65% four-seam fastballs in these starts, even though he has pretty good secondary pitches, and it's been working. So it'll be intriguing to see if he goes back to that. And I don't think he's fazed by righties or lefties. I mean, his last two starts, it's not only incredible the numbers, but also the teams he's facing. The Nationals, the reason why they're in this race, they've been a top 5 offense this year. 6 1/3, 1 run, 7 Ks against the Nats. The start before that, the Dodgers. We know the Dodgers. That's the best offense in baseball. 7 scoreless with 1 hit for Trevor Rogers. So, like, he is fully into form right now. I know that Cincinnati ballpark can sometimes hurt a starting pitcher who thinks he's in form, but he's also only allowed 1 home run in the last month. That might change in Cincinnati, but that's been a big part of his success.
It has been all of the humidity here these last couple of days, so the ball should be flying out of Great American, but that's all. I mean, that goes both ways, and Brady Singer has been home run prone so far this season as well, and going up against this Orioles lineup will be very interesting. The one thing that you can tell when Brady Singer is going right, he is locating the two-seamer, sinker, whatever you want to call it. I'm pretty sure those are the same pitch, the way that they move anyway. But his two-seam fastball, if he is hitting it on the first base side of the strike zone, then it's going to be a good day. If he is missing that, then he tries to bring it closer to the plate. It ends up going out over the middle of the plate, and it ends up getting clobbered. And Pete Alonso specifically will very much enjoy that sort of a day from him. And, there's going to be Reds fans of a certain age, me. And you might remember this as well. I don't know how closely you paid attention to the 2021 NL Rookie of the Year race. But Trevor Rogers, once upon a time, was right there, and Jonathan India beat him out for the NL Rookie of the Year that season. Saturday, though, that's the game that every Reds fan has circled. I've got it circled. You might even have it circled looking at it from the opponent's perspective, because Hunter Greene returns. And I will say I am bipolar about this, because I am very excited to see him back. And I'm a little bit concerned as to how quickly his rehab process went. We're talking about a guy that had bone chips removed from his throwing elbow, and he has made 3 rehab starts, 2 of those at the AAA level. The other one was at the complex level. Now, mind you, they've all looked good. He has been very good at keeping the ball in the strike zone, high strikeout to walk ratio, not giving up a lot of hits. Like, he looks good, but he should look good in AAA. It's going to be what happens after the first inning that he throws against the Orioles on Saturday. How does everything kind of progress for him? I am not, and I would love to be wrong about this, but I am not expecting him to throw more than 5 innings, which means that the bullpen is going to have to cover 12 outs on Saturday. So as fun as it'll be to see Hunter Greene back, I think that he will only have so much of an effect on that game, as opposed to hopefully what he will be able to do in the weeks coming after this. But this first game back, there's a lot of jitters for me, because I'm really hoping that he is 100%. He says he is. He says he feels amazing. He says he feels just as good as he did before, because he said that this was something he was dealing with since last October. He feels as good as he did before that point. But we got to see it, and we're going to see it against a really good lineup.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting, right? The Orioles, when they faced Hunter Greene last year, I think gave him like his worst start of the season. They knocked him out after 3 innings, scored 5 runs against him in an Orioles win back last April, kind of actually the day before everything fell apart, because then the next day it was the Easter massacre, and the Reds won 24-2, and the Orioles season was over at that point. But that was kind of our last moment of happiness. The 2025 Orioles was hitting, I think, 3 home runs off of Hunter Greene that day. Yeah, the Orioles offense is going to be ready. I'll be interested to see like what Greene's velo looks like. Obviously, that's a big part of his game, one of the hardest throwing right-handers in terms of starters in all of Major League Baseball. How his command is impacted by his first start of a season coming in July. And as you mentioned, 3 rehab starts is not 1. It gives you some time to kind of figure some things out. But do you worry that it wasn't enough? I'm intrigued to see how the Orioles offense, can maybe build off of a start last year. It's not an entirely new lineup that'll be facing him, so there'll be some bats that saw him there last year. But What's interesting to me is the other pitcher on the other side, and that is Brandon Young. And speaking of that Hunter Greene game last year, that game was also Brandon Young's major league debut. He made that against the Reds last year. He went 4 innings, 3 runs, not great, somewhat kept him in the game, had some jitters, and was shaky in his first major league start. He finished last year with a 6+ ERA. Brandon Young came into this year as the Orioles' number 8 starter in spring training. He was clearly ticketed for AAA, which is where he began the year. He was going to be okay depth as he worked on what he had to do. Well, the Orioles got injured, and they needed Brandon Young, and Brandon Young has been the absolute savior for this Orioles rotation this year. Like, there's no other way around it. Kyle Bradish has had his struggles. Boz has had struggles at times. Rogers has struggled at times. Brandon Young this year has basically had one bad start. He's got a 3.11 ERA in 13 starts. The Orioles are 10-3 in games that Brandon Young has started this year. I mean, every Brandon Young conversation is like, where would the Orioles be without him? He's got the top chase rate in baseball against a 4-seam fastball. So basically all he does is throw these high ride 4-seamers above the zone, and guys just can't lay off it. He's changed his splitter. He's changed his slider. They've become 2 really good swing and miss pitches. And a pitching prospect who is seen as like a ceiling number 4, number 5 guy for a couple years in the major leagues has turned into a guy who looks like a middle of rotation starter for the Orioles moving forward. So I'm intrigued to see, maybe some emotions facing the team that he faced last year at his major league debut and kind of what that looks like for Young. Then we go to Sunday where, if I have a feeling how these two teams have looked this year, this will probably be a rubber match to win a series. If I had to guess on Sunday, you've got 2 guys who I think their teams have expected probably more out of them this season than what they have given. That's the lefty Nick Lodolo, who I was shocked to see him sporting a 5+ ERA on the year. And then you got Kyle Bradish, who's coming off his worst start of the season, probably, where he walked 5 batters against the Nationals. But Bradish pretty recently has kind of turned things on. He had 12 Ks in Seattle. He had 8 scoreless in Anaheim after that, before that Nats start. So that one will be interesting. The Orioles have really struggled against left-handed pitching this year. Some of their guys who are meant to be lefty mashers, like Tyler O'Neill, are not mashing lefties. Is Lodolo okay? I know his last couple starts have been better, but what is going on there?
He is trying to reinvent himself on the fly, because you might remember in years past, dude has a back foot breaker that is just devastating, and guys can't stop themselves from swinging at it and can't hit it when they do. He's trying not to throw that anymore. He's trying to throw that as like his second or third pitch. He throws a fastball a lot more now. He throws a changeup a lot more now. And he's just a very mid pitcher the more that he limits the breaker. And it's tough because I don't know. I think I've said this sarcastic joke enough that I might actually be believing it, but I kind of want like a camera on his left index finger, because every time he throws that curveball, we're thinking, is there a blister? Did a blister form on the finger? Because that's his only problem. He has no other injury history to the point that you're worried about that, except for the fact that he keeps getting a blister that forms right up under his fingernail on his left index finger, because it's the way that he grips his curveball that causes that. And so it seems as though he is trying to reinvent himself as a fastball changeup guy that happens to have a devastating breaker that he throws every so often. But you can watch him in a start. He's scared of his breaker. He doesn't trust it. And when he doesn't trust it, he gets clobbered. And so one of 2 things has happened to him in his starts so far this year. And that is either he has trouble controlling the strike zone and he walks a lot of guys and he gets in trouble that way, or he's like, I won't walk guys today, and gets clobbered and gives up a ton of hard hit contact. So we haven't seen the best of Nick Lodolo. And you can go through his game log and say, well, this was a pretty good start. This was a pretty good start. But there are certain little aspects in those starts that you're just like, that's not Nick Lodolo, though. That's this other guy that's coming. Maybe Nicholas. I don't know if if his parents named him Nicholas. Maybe it's Nicholas Lodolo that we're watching right now. We need to get back to Nick, because we haven't seen that guy in a while.
Yeah, a lefty starter who's struggling versus the O's offense against lefties is the stoppable force versus the movable object that we'll get to see on Sunday. So we'll see if Tyler O'Neill, who's been a little bit better lately, can maybe pop one just over that wall in left field and try and get one going for the Orioles. Jeff, that was a great crossover. I think a lot of people know a lot more about the Orioles and the Reds and their unfortunate struggles this year. Maybe if somebody just wins this series 2 out of 3, I really don't see this propelling either team. I will say both teams are struggling. So both teams probably feel like, hey, this is a chance for us to beat another team that's struggling. And if one team sweeps the other this weekend, it's a possibility of being like that, like one final shot of adrenaline in the arm to be like, we can have a good July. Let's go and do this. So that's the thing I'll be watching for. And I'm also intrigued to see who is in the booth for the Peacock broadcast on Sunday, because that will be a national broadcast. They've done that cool thing where they take like one analyst from the one team, one from the other team. So that should be certainly fun. Jeff, tell everybody on the Orioles side where they can find more Locked On Reds content if they're looking for that this weekend.
You get us everywhere you find your podcast, all over YouTube, and follow us on Twitter at Locked On Reds and at Jeff Carr with 3 Fs, and follow my co-host Steve Offenbaker at S Offenbaker with 2 Fs. And yeah, we're going to be all over it. And we're so like very minutely focused in this series where it's just like, let's just build momentum. Let's not talk about the playoffs. Let's not talk about the division. Let's not talk about the overall season record just yet. Let's just see them start to build some wins, because in the last calendar week, the Cincinnati Reds have beaten Jacob Misiorowski and Paul Skeens, and yet they still sit where they are, and they only won one other game than that, and they got destroyed by the Brewers in every other game. So it's like, I'm happy, sad all the time.
Yeah. Luckily for the Orioles, they don't have a pitcher anywhere close to Jacob Misiorowski or Paul Skeens, so they might be in a good spot. If Reds fans out there, you want any more Orioles content, check us out, Locked On Orioles YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. And if you're a fan of either of these teams or either of these shows, you can check out the Everydayer Club for Locked On Reds or Locked On Orioles. You can get a ton of perks, some Discord, some ad-free episodes, and more to go to supercast.com, either lockedonreds.supercast.com or lockedonorioles.supercast.com. That does it for the week of podcasting. I'm sure both of us will be back on our respective shows on Monday, hoping we're recapping a sweep of our team over the other that kind of propels these struggling ball clubs forward into a better month of July. That is Jeff Carr, the host of Locked On Reds. I am Connor Newcomb, host of Locked On Orioles. We thank you so much for joining us on this Locked On MLB crossover episode, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.